Hey guys, Pastor Alex here. And before we jump into the sermon, I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much for tuning in, watching with us today. We hope this blesses and encourages you. So enjoy the message. For those of you who may be new with us this morning or watching online, my name is Alex Gallien. I'm the lead pastor here at Overflow. And like we just mentioned, we have been in the middle of a series called Love Ain't Easy. Why don't you say that with me? Say, Love ain't easy. Now, can somebody say amen to that if you've been through any kind of love? Now, normally I would take a second and fluff up and, I don't know, say a joke or make you laugh. But for the sake of time today, we're going to go ahead and jump into the Word of God. Today we're going to be in Colossians chapter number 1. We're going to start in verse 19. And while you're turning there, if you have your own Bibles or your Bible app, I use the New Living Translation. That's not to say that any other translation is not great and acceptable. I use the New Living because I can understand it a little bit better. And if you want to use the same version I'm using, it'll be right up there on the screens for you to follow along with. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Starting at verse 19, this is what it says. For God in all his fullness was pleased to live in Christ, and through him God reconciled everything to himself. Say everything. He reconciled everything to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means, and I want you to notice, it does not say by means of your really good actions, by means of your good attitude, by means of your good motives, by means of anything that you have ever done or could ever do. It says by means of Christ's blood on the cross. This includes you who were once far away from God. You were his enemies, separated from him by your evil thoughts and actions, and yet now, because of his goodness, he's reconciled you to himself through the death of Christ in his physical body. And pay close attention to this last verse. And as a result, he's brought you into his own presence, and you are now holy and blameless, and you stand before him without a single fault. Now, I read that, and I know someone's out there, and you're like, hold up. Why are you reading that? I came today because I heard we're going to be talking about divorce. What in the world does that scripture have to do with divorce? And if you're wondering that, just calm down. We're definitely going to be talking about divorce today. Be ye not dismayed, Church of Jesus. We're talking about the subject, but before we do, I got to clear the air this morning because many of us, if you're like me, we grew up in a toxic church culture where the people group that is ostracized and judged the most many times are the very people who are hurting and experiencing pain and heartache because of a divorce that they've already been through. And what we do is we allow this judgment and this separation and these mean looks and these behind-the-scenes conversations to take place about those people, all in the name of some verses that, might I suggest, we've taken radically out of context. And while I would love to jump into the meat of that and really dissect and explore those verses today, I don't have time to do it, and we'll do it another time. We're going to save that for another time because from the jump this morning, I read that scripture because I want everybody in the room to make sure we all get one thing. Divorce does not define you. You are not defined by divorce, because you want to know what you are defined by? If you've said yes to Jesus Christ, you are now defined by his blood, despite any sin or mistake that you've ever made in your life, whether it was divorce or telling a single lie. If you put your faith in Jesus, you're not defined by your mistakes or your past anymore. Now you're defined by his blood, which renders you completely clean, completely forgiven, and you're able to stand in front of God without a single fault, all because of Jesus' blood. Do I have anybody in this building who's thankful for the blood and sacrifice of Jesus? Come on, if you are, why don't you keep making a little bit of noise this morning? Now with that, I also need to make known, I'm not an advocate of divorce. Divorce isn't good. Divorce isn't right. I wouldn't wish divorce on anybody. And here's the thing. God didn't cause your divorce. Your sin caused your divorce. Divorce isn't God's will. Now, do I believe that God will still continue to work everything out for the good of those that love Him and are called according to His purpose, no matter what mistake you make? Absolutely, I believe that, but I still can't go without saying divorce isn't and divorce was not God's perfect plan for your life. And I'm saying this not for the people who've been through a divorce, okay, because you're hearing this and you may be feeling shame, maybe opening some wounds that have been closed for a while. It may even inspire fear in some of you, and I'm not saying this to those of you who've been through a divorce, because if you've been through a divorce, you already get that that wasn't God's perfect will for your life. You understand how hard that was and how much of a toll that took on you. I'm saying this for those in the room who haven't been through a divorce. I'm saying this for the singles, for the happily married couples that are happily married right now. I'm saying this for the couples that are on the brink of divorce, and I'm saying this for those of you who've been through a divorce and you're thinking about getting married again, okay? Because other people need to know what you already know, and that divorce is detrimental, and it's a detrimental process to every person involved with it. It's bad for you. It's bad for your ex. It's bad for your future spouse. It's bad for your ex's future spouse. It's bad for your community, your friends, your kids. It's bad for your entire family. And anybody who's experienced divorce would go on and agree with this. And it's the title of our message today. Divorce sucks. Plain and simple, divorce sucks, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't mean to say that to be funny or to just get a reaction or to have a shock factor. I mean it literally. Divorce sucks. It sucks away your joy. It sucks away your confidence. It sucks away at your finances. It sucks away at your friendships. It sucks away at your family. It sucks away at your kids. It sucks away at everybody you know. It sucks away at how you feel on the inside of you. Divorce sucks. In every sense of the word, divorce sucks. On every level, it's awful. And although I've never personally been through a divorce of my own, I am a divorced child, which means I happen to know 4 people who have experienced the pain of divorce. And so to talk about this subject today, I had my people reach out to their people, just see if they had any dates open today, see if we could schedule something that maybe worked out for all parties involved. And luckily for us today, I pulled some strings, I had some inside connections, and all 4 of them were available and more than willing to come and share. So, if you would you stand up on your feet and give them the loudest, biggest, grandest, overflow welcome to the most amazing people I know, my parents. Boom! Thank you. You guys can be seated. I'll make some introductions real quick because I have a ton of special people in the room with me this morning. So first of all, I'll introduce you to the people up on stage. This is Shane. This is my stepdad. He's the pastor of the Mission Church in Martin, Tennessee. Put in a plug if you're in Martin, Tennessee. If you're in Martin, Tennessee, you're looking for a church closer to home. Check out the Mission. It's where I was before I came here. I was a youth pastor there. It's an incredible church. This is my mom, Tina. This is my dad, Tommy. This is my stepmom, Michelle. You guys probably already know them, but for some people that you don't know, I have a grandfather in here right now. Bobby, would you raise your hand real quick? Show them where you are. I have some friends in here. Oh, hey, yeah, give it up. Hold on, we're not done. I'm going to make you give it up in just a second. But thank you, Nathan. I see you right there. I have some some of my best friends in the world with us in the room. Dakota, Brandy, Dakota's sister, Clara, are in here. Did you guys raise your hand? Just show them where you are. I know we have people watching online that we love and we cherish, and you're watching intentionally today, and I'm not going to say your names, but we know you're there, and we appreciate it, and we love you. And then lastly, And, ooh, this has been one of my favorite ones. I have a whole front row down here full of people. First of all, my wife, Samantha. But then moving on down the line, I've got siblings from both sides of the equation here. We've got the Gallien siblings. One is in kiddos. Her name is Selah. But then I've got Anna Claire, raise your hand. Ethan, raise your hand. Ethan's girlfriend, who's a part of our family as well, Naomi, raise your hand. Now we move on to the Hill side of the family. I got Audrey, my sister, Avery, my brother. Would you guys one more time give it up for my family? Now, I mean, just to jump into this thing, Dad, I know you have a lot to say. You feel real strongly about some of the stuff I just talked about. Start us off today just by talking about some of that.
To me, the biggest problem with divorce that we don't tend to think about is the fallout, because there's always casualties in divorce, and if you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. But the people who suffer the most because of divorce, the biggest casualty is always the kids. You know, your kids don't have a choice in their existence. As a parent, it is our responsibility to do what's best for them. You know, and if divorce isn't best for them, it's not the best choice. You know, two scenes from the movies that really, to me, exemplify what a broken home does to a child. I just want to describe them real quick. In the first scene, the guy has been at a bar and he's talking to his friends and he says, you know what? The moment I find out her parents are still married, I don't even talk to her anymore. And the other scene, the guy's had a rough day and he's getting ready to go out and he says, you know what? I'm about to go out and meet a bunch of girls with daddy issues. Hollywood, hear me, Hollywood understands the damage that we're doing to our kids. Why don't we?
Now, I want to be very clear from the beginning. There's no way that anybody sitting on this stage can fully understand or comprehend all of the reasons and situations that led to any divorce that's represented in this room. And we're not trying to sit up here and say that we do get it or that we understand. Everybody knows that when it comes to divorce, there are a number of variables that are always involved. It could be finances, constant arguing, an affair, illegal drug use, irreconcilable differences, other problems that people don't know about, abuse, the death and sickness of a child. I mean, the list goes on, and I'm not going to stand up here and harp on what's morally right and what's a biblical reason for divorce. I don't support divorce ever, okay? I don't ever like divorce. I wish it never happens, and we don't have to spend all of our time talking about what's biblical and what's moral. I think we all have a firm understanding of that. What I do want to talk about, though, is that when people get a divorce, I want you to remember it's people getting a divorce. It's not just figures. It's not just these objects and these storybook characters. It's real people with real families and real stories. And every person, no matter what the cause or reason behind their divorce, they all got a story. And so in the nature of just total vulnerability, Mom, Dad, would you guys mind kicking us off today just by talking about maybe some of the situations that ended up leading to y'all's divorce? If so, Mom, I'll let you go first.
So looking back at our situation, we probably shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. We were young, and we were in college, and we were not walking in the will that God had for our lives. And I got pregnant. And when you live in the Bible Belt and you get pregnant, the next step that you're supposed to take is to get married. And so that's what we did. Excuse me. But you know what we realized really quick? Love ain't easy.
Amen.
Getting married and becoming a mom really forced me to grow up super fast. And I knew that I had to get my life together, not just for me, but for Alex. And so one of the first things I did was I took us to church. I also finished college. I graduated, and I got my first teaching job. I had plans. I had goals, and I knew where I wanted my life to go. But I couldn't see that Tommy was going to that same place with us. He was just in a different place in his life at that time. We did have a love for each other, but we were not willing to lay down our lives for each other. I became really bitter And at that time, I couldn't see that I was very selfish and manipulative, and I was trying to force him into a lifestyle that he just wasn't ready for as a husband. I wanted things to be done my way or the highway. I didn't know how to show him grace, and I sure didn't know how to be a redeemer for our marriage. So that was when I made the decision to take Alex, and we left, and I filed for divorce.
Deb?
I don't really know why it failed. Who wouldn't want to be married to someone who wanted to be a perpetual 18-year-old? No, seriously. Having a child and getting married made a forced turn to maturity. I didn't quite do that for me. I was only worried about what I wanted to do. No future plans outside of where I was going to fish the next Saturday. I was continually living in the moment, and it was completely opposite of what Tina wanted and what she needed. You know, I wasn't a leader in the home. I couldn't even conceive of what it meant to lead a family. And I wasn't interested in God. She tried, but in the end, I just really and truly, I wasn't ready or willing to be a husband.
I know this conversation is already getting kind of intense because we got, divorced and remarried people that are already up here talking about this subject, and now they're talking about why they even got a divorce in the first place, and most of you have never even heard conversations like this happen without total animosity and loss of control in the room. But I thought it was super important that we start off with this subject because it's a fantastic reminder that almost always divorce is a two-way street, okay? Now, I know there are extenuating circumstances, and there's no judgment passed to anybody. I know that those exist. I know there's moments where drug use is happening, illegal activities, affairs, abuse, stuff like that. But here's the thing, all right? Most divorce cases are not represented by those situations. I would go on record and say that almost 99% of the divorces that we see happening are happening because it's, one, a team effort, and two, because neither individual within the relationship is actually and intentionally working on themselves and growing into the people that they need to be. I think Josh said it perfectly 2 weeks ago. He said, concerning marriage, he said, it's time for some of us to quit trying to work on we until we can start working on me. Don't expect we to change if me isn't changing first. If everyone in this room stopped trying to change our spouses and only focused on everything we needed to change, I would probably bet that nearly every single marriage in this room would wind up healthy and awesome and fantastic. But unfortunately, that's not the route that we take. Unfortunately, that's not the route that most people take, because working on me requires humility, and it requires diligence, and it requires brutal honesty about how me is a messed up person and how me has some changing to do. And people don't like doing that, and so they'd rather just kind of take the easy way out and opt for divorce instead. And especially, we see that happening in a day where media is glorifying divorce. You see it everywhere, man. People, it's like this expectation of, well, I mean, if we don't work out, then it's whatever, there's other fish in the sea. But that's not really how it's supposed to be, and divorce is not glorious. Okay, media may glorify divorce, but it's not glorious on any level. It may feel liberating at first, but in the long run, it's going to catch up with you. And in the long run, divorce sucks for a lot of people on a lot of levels, and there's a lot of things that are coming your way that media has not prepared you for. So if you guys would you mind talking to us for just a second about some of the experiences and feelings that you dealt with after divorce that no one ever told you about, that maybe you didn't see coming? I'll start with you first, Mom.
So I know this is probably going to sound terrible, but I know some of you can probably relate. The first few weeks after we left, it felt great. It was like a freedom had come over me. A weight had just been lifted off of my shoulders. And Alex and I were making a fresh start in a fresh town, in a new house, and I was able to make my own decisions, and I didn't have to answer to anyone. But it wasn't long until reality began to set in. Up until that point, for 5 years, when Tommy and I were still married, Alex was my whole world. Everything I did revolved around him. And soon after we left, we decided that Alex was going to go stay with his dad every other night. We only lived about 15 minutes from each other, so that was going to work out for us. But he was gone every other night and every other weekend. And at that point in my life, I became very, very lonely when he was gone. I didn't really have any friends at that stage. Most of them had either moved off or they'd already gotten married and had a family of their own. And I sure wasn't ready to start dating again. So those nights really left me in a dark and lonely place. Even though he was a really easy kid, I'll say that about him, I always felt like the bad guy because he lived with me and I had to do a lot of the discipline. I remember him coming home from his dad's house and talking about all the fun things they did together. They went fishing, they went swimming. But then when he came home, I had to be the mean old mom that made him do his homework and do his chores and, do everything that he didn't really want to do, but I was the one who had to enforce those rules. At that same time, I just really began to feel the weight of being a single mom and all the responsibilities that come along with that, taking care of the household, paying the bills, and at that point, I really thought that I was going to be raising a kid all by myself. I had a really good job teaching, but I still worried a lot about finances. I wanted to be able to make sure that Alex had everything he needed, and not only just the things he needed, I wanted to make sure he had the things he wanted. So I began to spoil him a lot, and that became an issue between the four of us. I'm sure you'll hear about that later. But you know what? Looking back, I already knew that love wasn't easy, but divorce, it wasn't easy either.
Dad?
Alex, I'll take unexpected pain for 25. Oh, if I could go back and talk to 20-something-year-old me. You know, at this point, when I'm in my 20s, I'm thinking a home, a house, it's a building. But what I found out after everybody left and I had to move back to my dad's and I'm living back and forth at my grandmother's, that a home isn't the sticks and wood that it's built from. It's the people that are in it. Right. Even if you're in an unhappy marriage, when you're away doing whatever you're doing, in the back of your mind, you always have that security that you're coming home to something. And for a lot of us, coming home to something is better than coming home to nothing. You know, when this happened, I didn't have a good job. I didn't have any money. This just lifted my levels of insecurity. I was used to, every day I'd get off work and I'd come home and immediately my hands are on Alex and we are playing basketball, we're playing baseball, we're doing something, we're going fishing, we're doing something. And now, every other day, I'm coming home to nothing. Your parents can't fill that void. Your grandparents can't fill that void. My whole rhythm was just thrown off. And then they moved to Sykeston, but that's a whole nother story. I thought when the divorce happened that joint custody meant I would get an equal say in how he was raised. I thought that I would still get to be dad half the time. I just didn't realize that I was essentially giving up my rights as a father by allowing the marriage to dissolve. Now, don't think that I was prepared to ensure enough communication with Tina to even allow this to happen. I was living in a selfish, skewed view of what was really important. And let me just say this. Following momentary feelings and not thinking about your actions and how they're affecting others around you, it is the highest form of self-worship.
I think this is good for everyone to hear because as he hit on, we ended up moving to Sykeston, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half away. And one of the truths that comes with divorce is that you don't always get to decide all of the consequences that come with your divorce. And even though in this moment where you may be contemplating it or you're thinking, I'm never going to get a divorce, when that time comes and you start thinking about it, just know everything that you think you have figured out, every loophole that you think you have figured out, you'll never be able to fully anticipate all the consequences of your divorce. We end up moving a pretty decent, a while away, an hour and a half away. And now, thankfully, fortunately, for me and for this whole dynamic, it didn't stay that way for long. It was only like that for about a year and a half. And after that time, we did end up moving back to this area. And funny enough, Dad and Michelle, around that same time, were really for the first times in their adult lives getting intentional about getting in church, being in church, and they started looking for a church to go to. And this is the part of the story where it starts taking hard lefts and hard rights that I don't think anyone in the history of the world could have ever anticipated coming. So, Michelle, talk to us about that season real quick.
Okay, so Tommy and I had been married for a few years, and we were starting to have some problems in our marriage.
Now, let me interrupt you right there. Did you hear that? They were starting to have problems in their marriage. It's crazy. He had already gone through a divorce, and then in his second marriage, he started having problems again. It's almost like divorce wasn't the final answer to the marriage problem. It's almost like, man, the things that you don't fix before you're single, they play their way into your marriage. And then if you're married and you have problems and you dissipate that marriage and then you don't deal with those problems of your own that you were having, you're going to take into the second marriage. And then if you still don't deal with them, you might take them into the third marriage and the fourth marriage. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, you've left a trail of destruction in your wake because you haven't dealt with your problems. Keep going, Michelle.
So the only thing that I knew to fall back on was my relationship with God that I had walked very far away from during college and in our marriage. And I grew up in a non-denominational, spirit-filled church that still is and was then very powerful and made a huge impact on my life. And that's the kind of church that I wanted for us. Now, I grew up in Alabama, so we couldn't go back to that church. So we started looking for churches in the local area, and we just couldn't find anything that fit that. So I started asking around, what's the most radical church around here? What's the one that, everybody's talking about? They're really different.
Hello.
Y'all know anything about that, I'm sure of it. So that's when I was told about exciting Southside Baptist Church in Martin. And actually, the very first Sunday that we decided to go, Alex was with us. And we got to go and experience that wonderful church. And yes, it was that church that had the rumors that they, swing from the chandeliers and stuff like that. But it was exactly what we were looking for. And they didn't really swing from the chandeliers. There were no chandeliers, but anyway.
That exact same Sunday, Tina and I had moved back from Sykeston. In Sykeston, we had encountered praise and worship. We had encountered a pastor who taught the Word of God in a way we could actually apply it to our life and grow. And when we went back to our home church, it just wasn't there. It was over our heads. The worship was hymns, and it was not what we were looking for. So when we left church that day, I got in the car and I told Tina, I said, I'm starving. I need what we had in Sykeston, and we need to start looking for another church. I hate to leave my home church, but I'm not being fed here. I've got to have something different. And she agreed, but we didn't know where to go. So that night, Tommy and Michelle brought Alex home, and Alex walks in talking about church and how good it was. And that wasn't normal. That wasn't anything we had ever heard come out of his mouth. So that kind of caught our attention. And the next thing we know, Michelle's telling us about how good the preaching was, how good the worship was. There's an excitement in their family about church. And that wasn't in our family at this moment about church. So God definitely had us intrigued, had us thinking, but we were thinking, is this even possible? Going to church with your ex, how's that work? There's no books out there. There's no guides that's going to tell you how to make that work. And we weren't really sure in that moment if we were ready for that. So we started to pray. We started to talk. And by midweek, our hunger for worship was leading us to make a decision that would probably change everything in our family relationship. So Tina calls up Michelle, talks a little bit more about it, and we decide the next Sunday to meet them at the nursery.
And what a legendary day that was. I was young, and I can still remember the vivid details that Dad's going to tell you about this day. So to not steal any thunder, Dad talked to us about that Sunday.
I need to back up to the first Sunday me and Michelle went, just so you can get a picture of the perspective that I was in. Now, she told you she was raised in a non-denominational church, and they swung from the chandeliers, and it was the church that the whole town talked about, spread all kinds of crazy rumors about. I was raised in a Methodist church. We do not swing from the chandeliers. At best, we might dust them. So going to this exciting Southside Baptist church, I had a feeling was going to be a little bit of a different experience for me. Now, to back this up, what most people don't know about me is that I'm actually an introvert. When you meet me, you're probably not going to catch this, but shout out to all the introverts out there. You know what I'm talking about. Not only that, I'm going to a strange church. My family is super well known in the Martin area. And anytime you come from a super well known family and you go into a public place, that means lots and lots of greeting and having to talk and say hi. And you're really uncomfortable with it most of the time. Now, when I walk into a church, or when my family went to church, we would prefer to sit in the back. If I'm going to a new church, I prefer to sit in the back or the lobby. Michelle is none of this. I thought when we walked in that she would understand. She would know the Gallien church rules, and we'd sit in the back and we'd be hidden until we're comfortable. We walk through the back door. She hits the center aisle, walks straight up to the third row from the front, and there we plop down. Can I tell you, it was a Baptist church, and on the third row, there was no one sitting around us. It was like a spotlight had just been shined down. As if this isn't bad enough, as if this isn't awkward enough, we take Alex home that night, and I feel like my ears are betraying me. What is Michelle doing? She's saying, hey, y'all ought to go with us next Sunday. Okay, I can do this. I can do this. Let me just fast forward and say this. We walked through the back door at about that meet and greet time. You know, that time that all the introverts are like, yeah, I hate that time. We come through the back door. We get about midway down. Now, I'm really thinking, this week, because of the situation, she'll let us sit in the back. She hits the center aisle. It's like flames are coming off her feet. We get midway down the aisle, and I promise you, this is not an exaggeration, an audible hush
We all
came
walked in
over the
together.
auditorium as we walked down that aisle. And she marched us straight to the third row where we all sat like a little row of ducks together. Awkward. Hated it.
Well, it may have been awkward for him, but that worship was amazing. There was a reason that they called it Southside Baptist Church. But yeah, I was aware that Tommy was a little uncomfortable. We were in his town, in a church where his family and his friends went, and we could feel it too. We knew that they were leaning over talking about us, and they were staring at us, trying to figure out what was going on. But you know what? That didn't really matter to me. What I was focused on was this kid right here sitting smack dab in the middle of all four of us, and all I could see was this big, silly grin on his face. He was cheesing. He was beaming from ear to ear, and at that moment, that's what really mattered to me the most. And the worship. Did I say a while ago how great that worship was?
And how about our worship this morning, by the way? Can we show a little bit of love to our team? Brand new song. Now, some of y'all need to get the lies off your face, because you're looking at this and you're like, but on the inside, you're like, never. You're like, what? Like, you're hearing this, and you're thinking you could never imagine. Now, some of you are hearing this, and this is your current reality. In fact, a few weeks ago, we had 6 families who were divorced, remarried, and all came to the same church services around here. Well, that's great. We're overflow. That's happening now. 20 years ago, I think it may have been the first time in the history of the world that happened. And while some of you cannot possibly imagine doing that or being in that place, whether it's with you and your ex or your parents who are divorced or whatever, I just want to make sure like, we get that. That's hard. There are some of you who are still dealing with serious pain and hurt, resentment, anger, bitterness there. And for a season, that is something you need to just let run its course, okay? We're not telling you that you need to just automatically become good friends with your ex and their spouse. There is a healthy amount of separation, and there's an amount of time where it's totally normal for you to feel a type of way. But I just want to throw out there, who ever said that it had to stay like that forever? Because as far as I'm concerned, I have never read in the Bible where it says if you get a divorce, you need to stay mad forever. I know God did not say that, and in fact, if there's one person who I can say maybe did say it, I would say we can attribute that to the world. But overflow, let me remind you, if you've said yes to Jesus and you're a Jesus follower and He's made you into a new creation, the Bible says that you're not of the world anymore, meaning you do not have to treat divorce the way the world tells you got to treat it. You get to break the rules. There aren't any more rules around divorce. Don't believe the lie, man. You don't have to stay stooped in bitterness and hatred and anger and pain for the rest of your life. That's just not how it has to be for you. The world says it, but that's not what God says about it. And Dad, I know this was something that you struggled with personally for a while. Talk to us about how you started overcoming that and how that started to really change on the inside of you.
In the world that I grew up in, and when I say that, I mean my personal little bubble of a world that I grew up in, divorce was really a very foreign thing. So when I started going through one, the only thing I knew to do was take the world's cue on how you're supposed to act. And you're supposed to act mad and resentful, and you're supposed to act like a victim no matter what you did. Pretend like you didn't. Yeah, you did. But Michelle had to set me aside, and she's like, look, this isn't about you and Tina's mistake anymore. How you relate to her, now it has to be about Alex. You know, and Shane and Tina and Michelle, they got this next part a lot faster than I did. But I'm glad they had it, and I'm glad we all ended up with that view that it was going to become about him. Now, let me preface this next part by saying this. I don't feel like that I even began to grow up until I got saved. It took that for me to begin to see beyond the end of my own nose. Now, I know that there's someone else in here. You're in some type of a similar situation. And you think that you have a relationship with Jesus because you know who He is. You think that you have a relationship with Jesus because you grew up in church. But what you've really got is a junior high relationship with Him, where you're saying you have relationship with Him, but you don't have any lasting covenant with Him. Salvation is a never-ending covenant with the Lord in which He's going to allow you to receive a piece of Him that's going to allow you to see and walk in truth. You don't have to live lost anymore. At the end of this service, we call it around here a fresh start. And you know already that you need to make this fresh start. So when He gives that altar call, I'm begging you, your life will change and the lives of the people around you will change because you finally said yes.
And you know, while this whole thing it started out to be, everything we do, we need to do for Alex and what's going to be best for Alex and every decision and every choice that we make. The more we ran after God and the closer we got to God and the deeper our relationship got with God, the more it kind of morphed into everything we do needs to bring honor to God. And it became less about Alex and more about God. And you know what that did? That made it to where it wasn't just good for Alex. It was good for all of us.
Somebody in here, I know you've been through a divorce. This room is too big and too full with people for there not to be multiples and multiples of people in here that have been through this. But I'm talking to the one where you think God is ashamed of you, that he won't have anything to do with you because you've been through this. But I want to start this off by saying he's for you. He's not against you. That's why Jesus
Absolutely,
went to
man.
the cross.
Yes, sir.
Was because you're not going to stop making mistakes after salvation. You're going to keep on making mistakes. And he never turns his face against you. He is always for you. Now, you may have negated your responsibilities as a spouse. Go ahead, just clap it up. Because those of you that are saved, you know what God has done for you.
Come on, man.
You can't get free without him. You may have negated your responsibilities as a spouse, but that does not negate your responsibilities as a parent. Especially in divorce, someone has to be a redeemer for the children. And a redeemer lays down their rights to do what's best for others. A child shouldn't have to choose between the parents. A child should not have to choose between their parents. It's not their fault. God gave two people a child, and he intended on those two people to raise that child, not just the one that got custody. Moms have a piece of them that child needs. Dads have a piece of themselves that child needs. He has to have it to get his identity in life. It isn't your new love interest job to parent y'all's child. They aren't the redeemer. You are.
My gosh.
Tommy, that's so good. Now, I need you to hear this. Love ain't easy. Divorce sucks. And Jesus loves your ex as much as he loves you.
Hope you're listening.
Did you hear that? Jesus loves your ex as much as he loves you. We've got to get on the page that Jesus is on. We've got to get on the page that Jesus is on. Because the devil is a liar. He's out to kill, steal, and destroy. Family was and is God's plan. And Satan hates God's plan. If you're not on God's side, you'll end up on Satan's side. I'm talking to married couples in here today as well. You may think your marriage is divorce proof. Get away from God for one moment, and the devil's going to come on the attack. You got to be real. You've got to pursue God. Yes, divorce sucks. Every aspect of divorce sucks. But it does not mean that you have to hate each other for the rest of your life. It does not mean that you can't work together for the best interest of your child. It does not mean that the devil wins. God saw fit to use the two of you to create your child, and it's your responsibility to work with the other parent. That's real. You also got to know, some of you are in here, I hear you. You're like, you don't know my situation. You don't understand what he's done or she's done. I may not, but God does. And God is pursuing them. God is interceding for them. God knows that transformation is possible for them. Just like God's pursuing you and interceding for you, that's what he's doing for them. It's time for you to join Jesus and start interceding for your child's other parent. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. That's the first task I got when I chose to marry Tina. Pray for Alex's salvation and pray for Tommy's salvation. That's what God told me to do if I was taking this step into this marriage. I had to believe God could do the impossible. You see, in 99, Tommy wanted no part of Jesus, church, God. But that wasn't impossible for God. And when God came to me several years later and asked me one of the most difficult questions God ever asked me. He said, Tommy is a new creation. Now I need you to treat him like it. That wasn't easy. That didn't happen instantly. It took time. But eventually, Tommy went from being my wife's ex to being my brother in Christ. That's God. Love.
I need somebody to stand up on your feet for just a second. My God. Y'all clapping. You're clapping. I hope you believe what you're clapping about. I hope you live it out. I want to give these 4 people up here super big props for just a second, because one of the things that I rarely overheard or was ever a part of was either party talking bad about each other in front of me. And unfortunately, some of your kids can't say the same because they hear you talk trash about their mom or their dad all the time. Every time their name gets brought up in conversation, you get mad and you get angry and you allow your frustration to be seen. Every time you're on the phone with that person, you're cussing at them, you're screaming at them, and your kid sees it the entire time. Yo, that ain't cool. And they did a really great job in making sure that I was never a part of any of those situations. And I want to we've already touched it, but let me remind you once again, when Jesus said, the call of following me is to forgive everyone and to love everyone, he didn't say, it's forgive everyone except for your spouse. I totally get it. You guys had a really awful divorce. You don't have to forgive them. You can hate them and talk bad about them all you want. It's cool. He never said, I don't see it anywhere. He said you got to love everybody. You got to forgive everybody. That's the call of God on your life, man. Not just to forgive and love the people that you want to love and forgive. Loving and forgiving your spouse. Dude, it's such a big deal. And I saw it happen, and it's like the story gets so crazy because for us, it didn't just stop with going to church together. If you guys would let him, God would blow your mind at how he would still use your life and use your yes to do something special for your kids and for your community. At us, it didn't stop with going to church together. Fast forward from that, every Sunday we were sitting on the same row. Shane, my mother, me, my dad, Michelle. That became a normal thing. People didn't bat their eyes at it anymore because it happened for 7 or 8 years in a row. Maybe that's an overstatement. Maybe 5 or 6 years, something like that. But it continued to happen. And then they all ended up in the same Sunday school class for years after that. And then fast forward to that, and all of a sudden, Shane, my stepdad, and Tommy, my dad, are co-coaching my baseball team together. Talk about awkward moments when I walk up and they say, Alex, who are your parents? And I'm like, well, this is my dad, Shane. This is my dad, Tommy. What do you do with that?
Good.
When Michelle and Mom both have Alex's mom on the back of their shirts, and people are like, okay, hello, we haven't seen this one before, and it gets even crazier, man. Mom and Michelle babysitting my siblings all the time. I've got siblings from the Hill family hanging out at the Gallien house, Gallien siblings hanging out at the Hill house. They're all becoming really close friends to the point of where we're having to remind them that they're not actually siblings and they're not related, and they're also not cousins. You're really genuinely, you're not related because people are getting confused because they're calling each other brother and sister and cousins, and people are like, how does that work? We don't get it. And we're like, it doesn't work. That's not how it is at all. But they just love each other. And then all of this, man, just compounds. Fast forward to me being an 8th grader, okay? I have 1 week to go and vacation, and instead of making me choose which family I was going to vacation with that summer, they set aside their differences, came together, and we went on one big family vacation together. We went to Destin, Florida, and when I say vacation together, I don't mean we were in the same city. We shared the same condo, the same living room. We're cooking together. We go and take family pictures together. or Shane's taking a picture of me with Dad and Michelle, and they're like, Alex, don't move, hold on. And then the next family comes and gathers around and all the siblings, and then I have, my friend who's there with us, he has to take a group picture of everybody. Literally have pictures of me with Mom and Shane and my siblings from that side on this side of the picture, and then Dad and Michelle, my siblings who were born on that side of the picture, and it's like, they like post that stuff on Facebook, and people are like, what? We don't get it. But I say this because that's what forgiveness practically looks like lived out, all right? That's what it looks like, and like seeing and treating that other person the same way that God treats and sees that other person despite your history with them. And I know that sounds like nice and unbelievable and heartwarming, and you've got the chills, and that's just so nice, and it sounds like a Hallmark movie waiting to happen. But the truth is, I want to remind you, these people sitting around me, they're all humans, meaning they still had rough patches in this experience. Like, I know we're doing a really good job at giving you the really good highlight reel, but there's an equally awful and terrible highlight reel. All parties had it tough, and not just the divorcees, not just my mom and dad had it tough. If I could recall to your remembrance, there are 2 other people that happen to be involved in this equation as well. And if you're a step parent out there, you already know this. Step parents have a whole unique set of difficulties that unfortunately nobody ever talks about. When was the last time you heard a sermon about how to be a step parent? We don't have that. We don't have that. There's not a how to be a step parent book. Like, one of the closest things we see in the Bible is Jesus's, earthly father Joseph. Think about it. He wasn't Jesus's father. He was his stepdad. But that's kind of all we ever hear about. But the step parents, see, they got their own set of difficulties. In fact, how many of you in here, and you're not going to be judged. We're up here doing this. To fall into one of these 3 categories. You are a step parent, you have a step parent, or your kid has a step parent. If that's you hit any of those categories, just shoot your hand up. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? And yet we never talk about it? Isn't that mind-blowing that probably it looks like the vast majority of this room is represented in that equation? So for the step parents out there, Michelle, I'm going to let you lead us off on that. Would you just talk about some of the difficulties that you faced and maybe give some hope and wisdom and advice to our step parents watching with us or represented in the room?
Sure. One of the biggest things that I had to deal with was, it started out right off the bang when we first got married. Let me back up and tell you who I am. I am an only child. I was spoilt rotten. I was used to getting everything I wanted, and I never had to share. There I am. So I get married, and I want, newly married, I want all of my husband's attention. My new husband, we're newly married. I want to spend every moment I can with him. I want him to be with me all the time. But every other day, I had to share him with a 6-year-old. And that was really hard for me. I never expected to have to do that, even though I knew Alex existed when I got married. You just don't know those kind of things until you're in the midst of it. And Tommy desperately missed his son. He hadn't seen him in a couple of days. And so he really wanted to take advantage of every moment he could with him. And same thing for Alex. Alex really missed his dad and wanted to just really, soak up all the time he could from his father and all of the attention from his father that he could. And so where did that leave me? Nobody really wanted to be with me. They wanted to be with each other. And I felt really like I didn't have a place. And it was really hard for me. But I just want to give some encouragement to you guys. If you are a step parent and you're in this position right now where you don't really know, how to deal with that, first of all, I want you to give yourself some grace, okay? You're supposed to have those feelings of wanting to be with your spouse all the time. This situation that we were dealing with was one of those monsters that divorce creates. It's not normal. It's not natural. So what you're feeling of wanting to be with your spouse all the time, that is normal. That's natural for a newly married person to want to do that. It's healthy. It's good. When you get married a little bit longer, you're not going to want to spend as much time with them, and it won't be as big a deal. But it's okay. Give yourself some grace. But the next thing I want you to do is alone, privately with your spouse, have a talk with them. That's something I never did. I never shared with Tommy how I was feeling. He's never been a step parent. He had no idea what I was going through. And so it caused battles that didn't have to be there, issues and disagreements that didn't have to occur, and jealousy and envy in me that didn't have to be there. So talk with your spouse. Let them know, not in a throwing guilt shade on them kind of a way, but just, hey, this is something I'm going through and I need you to understand that. And then maybe you two can come up with a plan together on how you're going to handle that situation. But the most important thing I want to encourage you to do, let them have this time. That child didn't ask for this, and they need their parent. They need that time with them. Let them, get in the truck and drive off together and spend that one-on-one time for the afternoon or whatever they have to do. Get over your selfish needs that you're having. Even though they're not bad, they are about you, okay? But you're going to have to get over them for a moment for the child's sake.
Shane?
Wow, Michelle, that's so true. One thing that all parents know, it's not easy raising kids. Our kids don't think the way we thought. They have access to stuff we never dreamed of having access to. But you layer in being a step parent, and you add a whole nother layer to that. It doesn't come with a good set of instructions on how to be a step parent. I'm called to love him, to raise him, to help in this group get Alex to where he's supposed to be. But I never know when I'm overstepping the boundaries of his mom or his dad. I'm always in this delicate place of, am I doing too much, not enough? What's my place? What's my role in that? It caused conflict with us, and it caused sometimes where there were issues with Tommy and all. We didn't always agree in how to parent. But we did not voice that before Alex. That was not an option for us. The other thing is, being in a second marriage, it came with baggage. There was things that he didn't do in the marriage that I was doing fine with, but I still lived under the guilt and the prospect that I might not do it as well tomorrow. And so whether it was verbally said or it just was implied, there were things from their past and failures that weighted on me. And for me, marrying someone who had been divorced also had a major impact on my life. At 17, I had felt God call me into the ministry, a call that scared me. No one in my family had really ever done that before, but it was definitely a call that was strong on my life. But religion had taught me that when I made the decision at 23 to choose Tina as my wife, a decision I'd make 1,000,000 times over, that I was saying no to going into the ministry. So I just assumed that was the case. But God had a different plan. At 35, God put me face down at the altar one Sunday night for over 2 hours as he told me the same call that he had on my life at 17 was the call that he had on my life today. That he knew every decision I would make, and he still knew what he was doing when he called me. And that I was about to start working with a college ministry. That freaked me out because there was an amazing college pastor. So I told God, I'm not telling her that I'm about to start working with a college ministry. You're going to have to do that. I didn't tell my wife why I wept on the floor for 2 hours when we left, and she had to drive me home. But 4 weeks later, the college pastor came in and said, I need to see you after church on Sunday. And when she came in, she said, I'm moving to Alabama, and God has told me that he has told you you're about to start working with a college ministry. I need you here on Monday night. So God can do what seems impossible. Your divorce has not disqualified you, and divorce is not the one mistake that is too big for our God.
So good, man.
And Shane didn't bring this up, but one of the issues that we had was that I consistently put Alex before him. I always took his side. And I don't know if that was just out of guilt, because sometimes I still do that with our own children. Honestly, that's an area of my life.
Y'all don't get quiet on her right now, parents, all right?
it's an area of my life that I'm still growing in. But as a mom, and I'm sure you guys can understand this, I wanted my kids to know that I always had their back and that I valued their opinion. But deep down, I know when I'm doing that I'm not honoring my husband. Y'all, love ain't easy, even the second time around. It's not easy, but I am so grateful that Shane always shows me grace on that, even when I don't deserve it.
And there's a lie that's going around that says you need to put your kids above your spouse. And that is a lie. Okay, don't fall into that lie. You need to put your spouse first. You need to treasure them and put them first. And Tommy did the same thing, and unfortunately for him, I didn't show him as much grace as Shane showed Tina, but he loved me anyway. But one of the things that I did notice about Tommy was that he was beginning to parent Alex out of guilt and make choices, and they were being based on guilt, a guilty conscience, because he felt like he had put Alex in a position where he wasn't getting everything he needed to get, or couldn't get everything he needed because of the divorce. And so that was something that Tommy was starting to do.
I know at this point, y'all are looking at us and going, well, my situation just couldn't work out like that. There'd be no way for my situation. Y'all are just good people. I ain't divorced because I'm good people. Heads up. The reason it worked is because we learned this by trial and error, grace. Trial and error, grace. Trial and error, way more grace is needed right now. Now, this next part is a recent revelation to me about putting your spouse first. When you get divorced and you're single, you can put your child first. But the moment you get remarried, your child's not first anymore. Your spouse is. If you're not divorced and you're just married, your spouse is still first. The health of your children should be a trickle-down effect from the health of your marriage. If you don't take care of your marital relationship from beginning to end while you're raising your children, when they are gone, there's not going to be a relationship to turn to.
Now, obviously, I don't know this personally because I'm not a parent, but Bet says we got lots of parents in the room, and everyone would agree with this. Of course, parenting is tough, and sometimes, as much as divorce sucks, sometimes parenting sucks as well. And as much as parenting is tough and kind of sucks sometimes, step parenting is maybe even more tough and sucks even more sometimes. I mean, just to rehash on what they said, you got to remember, dude, when you're marrying a divorced person, when you marry them, you don't just inherit their baggage, you inherit their spouse's baggage, because all of a sudden those problems from their spouse become your problems. You inherit the person that their ex marries baggage, and you don't get to pick who that person is that they marry. And they're going to be different people. They're going to think differently. They're going to live their life differently. They're going to have different convictions. They're going to have different dreams. They're going to see things in a totally different point of view. And they're going to parent differently in every way. And while my parents, are, of course, are an amazing example, just like he said, let's not get crazy and think that they didn't have their fair share of problems. And so just to be real vulnerable and to kind of give an example on what, the tip of the iceberg on an example of how we for sure did not have it all together. Michelle and Mom, I'm going to let you guys tell the baseball story real quick.
So from the get-go, I want you to make sure that everyone understands that the story I'm fixing to tell has two perspectives. I'm going to tell my side, and then in just a minute, I want Michelle to tell the story from her perspective. Because I think that's important to know, because when two or more people are involved in an incident, you can see things from a different way. It started out, Alex was about 10 years old, and it was during the summer, and it was his first summer to be in the pitching league. He was pitching that year for the very first time, and we were at one of his ball games, and the game was almost over, and I look out, and I could see him on the pitcher's mound, and he's holding his shoulder. and he's crying. He's not just crying, he is sobbing in front of everybody. And I was concerned, but I saw Tommy walking out to the pitcher's mound to talk to him, like good coaches do. And come to find out, while he was pitching, he had pitched several innings already at that game. And while he was pitching, he had popped his shoulder out of place. And he was crying, he was hurting, and he was in a lot of pain. So Tommy ended up taking him out. And as he's heading towards the dugout, I see Michelle heading towards the dugout. She came down out of the stands, and she was heading towards the dugout. And I said to myself, I was thinking, that's so sweet. You know, she's going down there to check on him. But then me and a lot of people around me could hear her talking to him. And I could hear her saying things like, you just need to stop crying. And I could hear that she was reminding him that sometimes he did this a lot when he didn't get his way, and that basically he was just a big old crybaby, is what she was saying. And as a mom, my heart hurt for him. I felt like he had a really good reason to cry. He was in a lot of pain, and I could not understand why she was down there saying this to my baby, embarrassing him in front of all his friends and me in front of my friends. And I felt this anger begin to creep up in me that had no business being there. Luckily, the game was almost over, and I remember us going to get in the car, and I called Tommy up, and I'm like going off on him about what Michelle had done. And I told him, I was like, tomorrow I want all four of us to meet at church, and we're going to talk about what happened at the ballpark. So up to this point, that's my perspective from it, and I'm going to let Michelle tell her part, and then we'll get back to what happened.
Okay, so at this point in Alex's life, he really was a big crybaby.
Okay.
He cried over everything.
Sam, she said he still is. I love you.
Sam's on my side, yes. Okay, so but what I didn't realize is that his arm had popped. I never knew that. As a matter of fact, I did not even find out about that part of the story until this week when we were talking about it, literally. So my perspective was, here we go again. Alex is tired. Alex is, not getting something he wants. And, he's been walking these batters, so his dad's got to take him out of the game. But that's not what Alex wanted. Alex wanted to pitch to the very end and, cue the crying, because he's not getting something that he wants. And, all I was telling him is, there's no crying in baseball. You can't do that. Passionately, yes.
Okay, so fast forward to the next morning. We all show up at church. I don't think we sat together that day because I was still really mad. And after church, we met in the nursery. And before I go on, I need to tell off on myself, for those of you who don't know me. When it comes to my children, if anybody says anything about them or does anything to them that I think that's going to hurt them in any way, I become this person that is not very lovable. Do I have any other mama bears out there? Hey, there you are.
Amen. Somebody agreed with that one.
So anyway, this mama bear unleashed all of her anger onto Michelle that day. I remember saying some things to her that were absolutely terrible. I remember saying, I can't believe you came into our town and you embarrassed my child in front of everybody that we knew. I remember thinking also that, give me just a minute because I want to say this right. Oh, one of the main things I remember saying to him is, you better not ever talk to my child that way again. Not our child, my child. I also said a few choice words in church that I probably should not have said that day. But anyway, what I did not realize is that I was doing to her exactly what I thought she had just done to Alex. And that was not the right thing to do. While I'm on that subject, ladies, I want to talk to you really, really quick. You do not have the right to be hateful to your ex-husband's spouse.
Oh, don't get quiet. What? Yes, I do. No, you don't.
There's no place for it. It's uncalled for. Not only are you setting a bad example for your kids, but you're dishonoring God when you do that. Don't treat them the way that I treated Michelle that day. It really set us back in our relationship for a long time, and it took us a while to overcome it. But through Jesus and through us giving each other grace, a friendship happened. And it only got stronger throughout the years. You know what? Thinking back to that day, Michelle, how did that make you feel whenever I talked to you that way?
That was a really rough day for me. That meeting made me feel, when I was being taught to and had these things said to me, it made me feel really insecure. Kind of like, where is my place in this, in parenting Alex? Do I even exist? Do I even matter? You know, am I invisible? Do I even count? You know, like, I don't even count. My opinion doesn't count. The way I'm doing things, it doesn't count. And I'm just going to be really honest with you and vulnerable. I never figured that out. I never figured out where my place was in parenting Alex. And, you know, he didn't, in our situation, it was so different, and I know it's very different in a lot of ways, but in this way, it really was different. He had a great mom. He didn't need me to be his mom. So I didn't have that card that I could pull. Like Shane was the head of their household, so that was his place. Well, that's not my place, so I couldn't fall back on that. And I never really found where my place was as a step-parent in parenting Alex.
And I think this is super important for parents and step-parents alike in the room to hear, because that's exactly what the enemy wants you to believe. He wants you to believe the lie that you don't matter, that your voice is unimportant, that you're lesser than parent, and that if you just faded off into the background that nobody would notice because you're not important. But please hear this. Hear this from my mouth as a stepchild, but also hear this from your stepchild's mouth, okay? That's a lie. That's not true. You're incredibly important to that kid, man. Shane, the reason I am who I am today is because two amazing people in my life named Michelle Gallien and Shane Hill, who just so happened to be my step-parents, man. They were huge influences on my life. Shane, he didn't just coach my baseball team. He coached my football teams, and he came to all my games, and he built me multiple trampolines that me and my buddies broke and destroyed 24/7. He provided for me. He had tough talks with me. He was a spiritual giant in my life. He did all kinds of things for me, man. Shane was there even up to the point of last year or a year and a half ago when Sam and I moved back to Tennessee. He hired me to be the youth pastor at their church there at the mission in Martin, Tennessee. I worked for him, man. He opened up their house, and we stayed with him. And Michelle, it's no different with her. From day one, dude, she's been one of my biggest advocates. She's come to all my games. She's supported me in everything that I've ever done. She's also had tough talks with me from time to time that I didn't always want to have, but she was willing to have those talks with me. She's currently, to this day, one of my best friends. Like, I hang out with Michelle, and we talk on the phone, and we go out to eat together for lunch, and she's gotten me jobs, even recently, like hooked me up with opportunities to step into my calling, and not to mention, way before I was ever saved and living for God and concerned about the call of God in my life, Michelle was the one out front leading the prayer charge for me. It was her. She was the one. Step-parents, hear me today. You're important, okay? Don't listen to the lies of the enemy, man. We cancel those right now in Jesus' name, dude. You are important. Don't drop the ball. Don't listen to what anybody else has to say. You have a responsibility in that kid, all right? And then to kind of end us today, I do want to take a moment and speak to all of our kids of divorce, okay? Because here's the truth. If you're a kid of divorce, you already know this, all right? Not living with your biological parents, no matter how good your situation is, not living with your biological parents, it takes a toll on us, and it's hard. And parents, I don't say this to guilt trip you into treating your kids some type of way, into spoiling them or anything like that. I say this to remind you, give us a place to hurt sometimes, all right? Relax. We're going through stuff that you put us through. Give us some time to deal with that. Be sensitive to that. Lord, don't make the situation even harder on us. Here, someone needs to hear this. Do not use us as a tool of manipulation. Quit pinning us in between our dad and our mom just to get your way. Quit making things hard on us, man. Don't argue in front of us. And for the love of all that's good, get over your petty disagreements, because it's the least you can do after ripping our family apart. It's the least you could do. We didn't make that decision. You did, and now we're dealing with it, all right? So get over yourselves, all right? And I don't just mean to speak to parents, to our kids in the room. Hear me, all right? Yes, have your space to hurt. Divorce sucks. It's hard. You're going to be ripped from, you spend this holiday over here and this holiday over here, and who sits where at the ball game, and what happens when you get married. Can they stand in the same room together without cussing each other out and ruining everything for you? For some of you, you can't, and you need to get there, because my parents sure were there. My marriage was awesome, but you're thinking about some of this stuff, and it freaks you out. And okay, hurt for a second. All right? It sucks. Yes. But get over it, all right? It happened. Life happened. God is more than enough to heal any area of your life that is affected by this. You don't get to live the rest of your life making the excuse that you are the way that you are because of your parents' divorce. You got to grow up, all right? You got to walk with God, that you got to have integrity with God as well. And I'm not, hopefully, I'm not like coming off harshly to anybody in here, but grow up, man. And here's one for you. I'm glad I looked at this because it reminded me. Children of divorce, everyone's going to agree on this one. Please quit pinning your parents against each other to get your way. All right? We know what it is. It's manipulation, and all of us know how to do it. Kids know how to do it if their parents aren't divorced. They go to mom. Mom says, no, you can't have the brownie. So let me go to dad, not tell dad what mom said. Dad, can I have the brownie? Dad says, sure, have the brownie. And then all of a sudden now, dad and mom are pinned against each other because she's like, I already told him he couldn't have the brownie, and you let him have the brownie. And the dad's like, I wanted to give him the brownie. Give him the brownie. What's the big deal about the brownie? And now they're fighting. That happens when you're married. How much more do you think it's going to happen if you go through a divorce? You don't even live with each other. You're already talking bad about each other. You're teaching your kid how to do that. When you talk bad about each other, you're teaching your kid how to pin you against, and it's going to happen, all right? It's going to happen. I did it. You better believe I did it. It's one specific story, and we're about to wrap this thing up, but I remember when I was in middle school, I remember the first time I started really doing this and learning how to do it really well, pinning my parents against each other. I wanted to go to a different church that we were all for going to, all because I had some buddies that went to some other church and they played basketball there. And so I wanted to go to that church, and I made this big deal about it, and I ripped my parents away from going to the same church, and that caused our families to drift apart. I mean, we quit seeing each other. We quit growing in God together. It caused my siblings to not spend a lot of time together for that season. And then on top of that, I wasn't serving God. I was as far from God as anyone's ever been. And fast forward about 2 years, our families have grown apart. All this other stuff is happening. And I'm about to turn 16, and Dad and Michelle want me to go to this youth conference. And I ain't having it. I don't want to go to this youth conference. One, it's on New Year's Eve, and so I want to go hang out with my boys and sneak out and drink and do all this stuff that I'm not supposed to be doing anyways. I have a basketball tournament that I'm going to be playing in that weekend. Even though I was a sophomore and I wasn't even going to play that much, it was so important, drastically more important than, the call of God on my life, because basketball and sports here in the South is always more important than, God or growing in Him. I don't mean to be talking to anybody in here right now, but that's where I was. And then to top it off, I was about to turn 16. I was about to get my license. And so I was like, I'm not trying to go to some church conference. I'm trying to get my license, roll around with some girls, and have some fun. It's New Year's Eve. So instead of talking to my dad and Michelle about it and having like a civil conversation, or instead of just doing what they told me to do because I'm their kid, I go behind their back and I go to Mom and Shane and I feed them a whole bunch of lies. I say, Dad and Michelle are saying that I got to go to this church conference, and frankly, man, I'm just not comfortable with it. I just don't know how I feel. It's kind of weird, and I'm just not sure about kind of what they do there. And I'm just scared to go. And I got basketball, and Dad's not my legal guardian. I pulled the card. He's not my legal guardian. He can't tell me what to do. And I set my mom up in a position to fail. And that's exactly what happened. I divided my families because of that decision. I got my way. I didn't go to that conference. And my family's divided even further. Now, thankfully, fast forward a few months from that moment, and I end up getting a DUI. And I know some of you are like, thankfully, you got a DUI. I've never heard that one come out of anybody's mouth. But I say that because me getting the DUI, it was the moment in time where all of a sudden the division that I had honestly been causing in my family for years, it started to dissipate because they quit listening to me for the first time. And they all came together and they agreed on my punishments. They began praying for me. They all got unified. And you want to know what happened? I end up getting saved a few months later. Because they come together. My life ends up getting changed forever, all because of 4 parents who quit fighting and put me and put God out in front for the first time. Here, lady, parents, men and women, your kids are going to do this to you. They're going to set you against each other. Quit listening to your kids. They're not the parents. Don't let them be the parents. They don't get a voice into the decisions that happen between you and your ex, okay? That's not how it works. They don't get that voice. They're not the parent. You better stop listening to them right now because they're going to rip that relationship apart. And then this moment happens, and this is where my smile gets big, because all of a sudden now in my life, for the first time in years, my parents are back to this like unified thing that I hadn't seen in a long time. And then the story starts getting even crazier than it was before, because now they all start going to church together again, back at the same church. And I'm living for God at this time. And then fast forward a few maybe weeks from there, and all of a sudden at the same church, my dad is the youth pastor, my stepdad is the college pastor. At the same church, this is happening, and it's freaking people out all over again, just like it did the first time. Then I pack up and go to ministry school in Alabama, and all of a sudden every couple months, they are all taking those family trips all the time. All my siblings are all sleeping in the living room together on my floor. My parents are like in the kitchen and in my room. They're all staying in my house. It's like the size of a nickel. I mean, it's tiny. And we're all hanging out. We're doing this thing all the time. We're taking pictures. This is happening. Fast forward out of ministry school. And Lord, I get married. All my parents are at my wedding. They're helping. They're doing this thing. They're not fighting. Then all of a sudden, we move back home to Tennessee. And the first week that I'm working as the youth pastor at the mission, Michelle and Dad show up to help complete a full-scale renovation of the church that they didn't even attend at the time. My siblings are becoming close again. We're sharing holidays together at this point. Like, we're doing Thanksgiving together because there's not enough time for us to do it separately. So, hey, why not come together and do it together, because that's going to be fun, and we love each other. Shane has had Dad preach at his church, and if nothing else, look at what's happening up here today. It's crazy. Divorce doesn't define you. Divorce is not more powerful than the blood of Jesus. He died to reconcile everything. Everything. Every decision, every moment of failure, it reconciles everything. And you now stand in front of God without a single fault. The power, man, God's more powerful than divorce. Divorce sucks, but God's still more powerful. There's still hope. There's still redemption. Now, we've run way over time, and I get that. Thank you guys for being in there with us today. As we prepare to transition this, I want to let you guys take a moment, and if you have any final remarks, any last words that maybe we didn't hit on, they don't have to be anything specific, just go for it. Michelle, I'll start with you first.
So the phrase that kind of sums up everything that I feel like has been said today is, through all of it, no matter what, just keep your love on. Yeah. Shout out to my small group. Told y'all I'd do it.
Is that fair?
Yeah,
Can you do that?
Sorry. We have the best. But keep your love on. No matter what's going on, don't let that person have enough power to turn it off. Okay? If you're following Jesus and you've given your life to him, you've got the Holy Spirit in you, and you do have the power to keep it on. Absolutely. And as a step parent, find out, ask God, why am I here? What's my purpose in this child's life, or these children, however many there are? And then take responsibility for that and take it seriously and do it. That's it.
Mom?
I guess I just want to share my mother's heart on this whole situation. I realize that what we have here is very unusual. And I'm sure there are probably some of you sitting out there who don't even want to attempt this lifestyle that we created for Alex. But why not? What have you got to lose? Yes, it's hard. And yes, we all had to make sacrifices. But it was so worth it, and it still is. I think you've got the gist that divorce sucks. But you know what? I want you to remember something. Your child did not divorce his parent. You did. I did too. But you know what? It is still our job to train up our child in the way he should go. And I believe that we should do that together. And you know what? You guys can do that too. You may have to tweak it to make it fit your situation, but it is possible. And if you can't do it for yourself, I just hope and pray that for the sake of your children, you will do it for them.
Dad?
And I want to preface this real quick and say this. What I'm fixing to say is aimed at the people that are having trouble in your marriage and you haven't gotten divorced yet. Those people who still have a choice. When you choose divorce, you're choosing not to be a redeemer. There is no such thing as your divorce. When you go through a divorce, everybody connected to you gets divorced also. Everyone connected to you gets to pay the price for your choice. The grandparents' relationships with their grandchildren, it changes, and it can ultimately cause them to lose time with their grandchildren. Not fair. You lose time with your child because, like it or not, you have to share. Not fair. Your ex-spouse loses time with their child. Not fair. And the child loses time with both parents that they love dearly. Not fair. And not to mention, you don't get to pick who your ex-spouse decides to have a relationship with and the effect that that's going to have on your child. Not fair. And if they move, you don't necessarily get to move with them to a new town. Not fair. In divorce, the ramifications of your decisions are going to have unfair consequences on people who don't deserve it. It's not just your divorce.
Shane?
We may have had the best example of what life after divorce can look like. We coached together. We traveled together. We prayed together. We sought God together. We pastored together. But it wasn't easy. It still had challenges. We had to choose to work together. There were times when we didn't agree, and we had to see the other person's side. We had to do what was in the best interest of Alex. We had to listen to God. Hear me. You need God involved. You need God involved if it's a husband and a wife. If there's an ex-husband and his wife, you absolutely have to have God involved if you want to see what we saw in Alex's family happen. It's amazing. But divorce still sucks. Divorce didn't fix Tina. Divorce didn't fix Tommy. Michelle and I, we didn't fix them. We just added our issues to the equation. Made it a little more crazy, a little more challenging. We all had to make the choice to allow God to transform each of us. We had to trust and obey God. We had to believe that God wants to do what looked impossible. We had to believe that God hates divorce, hear me, but loves everyone involved in a divorce. God hates divorce, but loves everyone involved in a divorce. We had to choose to love when love ain't easy. We had to believe that God, if God can do this for Alex, this is our belief. If God can do this for Alex's family, God can do this for your family. God can change your situation in a moment. He's pursuing your ex. Will you join him in praying for him or praying for her? Believe that with God, all things are possible. Believe me when I say divorce is not too big for our God.
Would you guys stand up on your feet and just give my parents a little bit of love? I need you to do better than that, man. This is a big deal. They bore their souls this morning. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in with us today. We hope this message blessed you and encouraged you. If you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to do that. Click subscribe below. If you don't like our page on Facebook or follow us on Instagram, be sure to do that too. And if you want to give into the move of God happening here at Overflow Church, all you got to do is go to overflowchurchonline.com and it'll walk you through the steps. So we love you guys. We appreciate you tuning in with us. Have an incredible day.